this concoction of ingredients, right? The supply constraints, the demand, everything about it is made this the best market to invest in the world, hands down.
Hey. Thanks for being in the REC experience. I'm your host, Jas Takhar, with your girl, Laura Elto Stewart.
Hey guys, how's it going?
This was an amazing and such a fun episode we did in front of a live audience of almost like 400 people. We had 200 in the room.
Right, and then online as well.
That was new for us.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. It was super exciting because normally it's just the two of us in this room, really.
Yeah, and then it's just like myself and a guest or somebody, like we're all doing it together. But the first time we went live in front of a live audience, and we really gave them the full experience.
The full experience.
Right?
We had the clapper, action, and you went off and did your thing, and it was awesome.
We had, thank you for that. I appreciate that. But on this episode, I also had Simeon join me, my business partner. You guys know him. But we had a very special guest. In fact, you'll probably hear us saying special guest a few times.
We do say, and actually,
he's busy.
And we said this about his business partner previously.
Yeah,
so
Peter Politis.
This guy is also a dear friend of the REC.
So Peter Politis, his business partner, is the CEO of Greybrook Realty. So if you haven't checked out that episode, go back and check that out. Peter really brought the straight goods. Sasha Cucuz is the CEO of Greybrook Securities. And these two gentlemen are very, very good friends of the REC because for a couple of reasons. They're awesome guys, nice guys, but they're so, they know the real estate market.
They have
know
their
securities.
finger on their pulse. I mean, everything that Sasha was talking about, he mentioned something that really kind of stuck with me. People say to him often, well, it's easy for you to say you want to invest in Toronto because you live in Toronto, so you always invest where you live, and et cetera, et cetera. But I'm from Vancouver. Why would I invest in Toronto? And he says, I don't invest in Toronto because I live here. I invest in Toronto because it's a good place to invest. And they have properties and they do other sorts of investments down in the U.S., certain things that he would never even dream about doing here because it just doesn't work in this market. And so he went into detail about why the economic factors that make Toronto such an interesting place to invest in.
And he also spoke a lot about the importance of research and how many people is on his team. And he really spoke about what they're looking for, the factors that you mentioned, and actually talk about specific live opportunities that we were presenting to the live audience at that time.
At that time,
but you can, look, we did talk about Toronto specifically, but you can take that, all the stuff that Sasha spoke about,
take it
anywhere.
And take it anywhere. You still want to be looking for the same factors.
Sure.
So essentially plop yourself in any city, look at those factors that are going on. Do they make sense? And then carry forward.
I did actually want to bring up, Laura, some of our past videos that we've been getting a lot of reviews and engagement and comments.
Well, we've been up to a whole bunch of stuff.
We've been up to a whole lot of stuff. I mean, obviously Toronto-centric, because we get to see a lot of homes and condos, we're starting to bring out some of these tours and kind of giving people an inside look.
Yes. Selling Toronto is what we dubbed it.
Dubbed it Selling Toronto.
Yeah.
And we went into a cool $12.2 million penthouse condo in the Four Seasons.
Right. Well, not penthouse.
It wasn't a penthouse. No, so that was the Hudson Yards. That was in New York,
exactly.
Hudson
So
Yards.
this one was halfway up the building, but what was so cool about this was one of 2 units, I believe, that had a wraparound terrace, essentially.
2,000 square feet.
Sides, 3 sides of the building. Bigger than most people's homes was a terrace on this thing.
Look, I mean, I didn't know how many people actually love seeing the inside of homes. It's kind of like real estate porn. They just love, it's the cool thing to do now.
Yeah,
right?
it is.
And people watch it all the time. So we're hoping that it's bringing you value and some
just
entertainment.
Some entertainment,
right?
exactly.
I know you watch all those shows as well.
I do.
$1 Million Listing New York. Guilty.
Yes. And so this is that.
And it made sense for us to showcase the cool properties in Toronto. But we obviously did the Hudson Yards one in New York. We have an upcoming video probably in about mid-November to late November.
We're showcasing one in Montreal. So we're going to keep doing this based on all your comments and your feedback.
We have fun doing it too, right? Just seeing the inside of these places.
I like going into multi-million-dollar properties every now and then and being a fly on the wall, so to speak.
Especially with the condos, right? Because you're high, you're up so high that you get to see some incredible views of our city.
You get what you pay for.
And even living here, we don't get to see it all the time, right? No. Especially from those angles. As always, Elto, thank you for everything you do.
You bet.
To you, the viewer, please leave us a comment. give us a review. If you're listening on a podcast platform, a 5-star review on iTunes, on Spotify always helps us. But if it's anything less, we still want to hear from you guys. And please share the podcast. A lot of you are listening. We know that. We can see the numbers, but not everyone is telling their friends and family that this still is the best podcast from a real estate, entrepreneurship, and leadership perspective. And we can't wait to see you guys in the flesh one day. Looking forward to it.
Enjoy, guys.
REC Experience presents Real Estate, Entrepreneurship, Leadership with your host, Jas Takhar. The REC Experience podcast is now on air.
Keyspire Mastery Meetup, Episode 2.
Hey. Thanks for being in the REC Experience. I'm your host, Jas Takhar. And this time we brought you a special guest. He wanted me to say special. He really is, and I'll tell you why in a second. Joining me again for the second part is Simeon Papa Elias, my business partner. You good, brother?
Hello, everyone.
Had a good time on our first episode with Kyle Hampson from Miller Thompson. But our special guest today between us is none other than Sasha from Greybrook. How are you doing?
I'm feeling special. So thank you for that.
Sasha, there's for the 2, 3, maybe 4 people in this room and our friends online across the nation right now are watching on Facebook Live that don't know you or Greybrook. Give us the the origin story a little bit.
The origin, yeah, I'll give you the abridged version. So I believe my partner Peter has been on the show with you before.
Yes, a couple of weeks ago, actually.
Yeah. Which is amazing, and I'm sure.
And actually Darcy as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, great. So both of them. I'm third on the depth chart apparently. So it's
The best for last. The best for last, I think.
Hopefully you guys have been able to recover from the loss in impressions and views you've had having those two guys on there. But no, in any event, so our company focuses on basically investing equity in real estate development. Our major markets are obviously Toronto, the GTA, Southern Ontario, as well as South Florida. And we also do some work in Ottawa, Montreal, Texas, other places like that. But really the vast majority of our work is done here in Ontario.
Now, you guys are partnered up with some of the biggest developers and builders like in the country and on the continent. Like, what does that really mean? Like, how does that all happen? And what does that really mean to an investor more specifically?
Right. So our firm's role really as the asset manager is to find good sites, good locations, underwrite them. So look at all of the attributes that make it a good investment, make sure that we do all of the diligence, and then acquire the site together with a partner. So you mentioned some of the partners. They're responsible for the day-to-day execution. They are the ones with the infrastructure required to go out and be able to deliver these large-scale developments, whether they're housing developments, condo developments, retail developments, whatever they are. And our job from the point of acquisition is really to stay on and represent investors' interests and make decisions together with our developers that are both designed to, hopefully maximize our profitability, obviously, and also be able to help, protect ourselves in markets that change and make pivots and decisions if they're required. So really, it's an active strategy. Everybody sort of assumes a development, when you put your brochures out is a straight line. I wish it were that way, but there's obviously a lot of curveballs that can come at you, and we're there to help navigate with our partners.
You have so much data. In fact, a couple of days ago, maybe 3 days ago, I saw you on a panel and heard you on a panel with a couple of big wigs from a couple of the major banks, 5 major banks.
Well, it's only my favorite economist.
Yeah,
So.
CIBC's Benjamin Tal was on that panel along with Urban Nations. I forget her name.
Pauline Learman.
Pauline.
Yeah.
What are you hearing and seeing? Because we get a lot of our statistical data from Greybrook as well, right? Because you guys are like right on the pavement, literally speaking. Like, what are you seeing in the Toronto market right now?
Yeah, so we have, as you mentioned, we have about 35 million square feet under development. So it's quite a bit. Obviously, we've established we're not a developer, but if we were, we'd probably be one of the largest. Yeah. So we have a lot of stuff. Okay. Yeah. So part of what we do is we have a group that is dedicated to kind of research and market research and really being at the forefront of what's happening. Because one of the things, if people live in the GTA or are familiar with the GTA, even for those watching that are not from the GTA is one of the fastest moving markets. Right? Like,
what does that mean? Like,
well, you could have a launch of a housing development, for example, and pricing could be at one level, and then a month later it can be at a different level. It can actually, and frankly, that's unique to markets like the GTA, and it's not a speculative demand from our perspective. It's not that people are caught up in the hype. It's that we have some pretty unique characteristics within this geography that lend themselves tremendously well to this type of environment for development and price appreciation. Not the least of which is obviously our growth in population. So we have a tremendous amount of growth. We have about 150,000 people coming into the GTA every single year, literally every single year.
And that's just outside of the country that's immigrating into the GTA,
That's exactly right. So, when you take into account migration numbers as well, it's higher than that. And in fact, if both of you were there at our panel, but Benjamin Tal, one of Canada's most respected economists, had gone so far in his presentation as saying that those numbers are even underestimated because they're not accounting for, foreign students, for example, or people that are here, they're living in Toronto, they're part of the population base coming in every single year, and they're just not accounted for in the numbers. So why does that matter? Well, simply when you have demand, obviously that's going to be a key factor to having, real estate pricing appreciation, but it's not enough. So you have to look at the supply side of the market as well. And when I say that the GTA has some unique attributes, they're really around the supply side more so than the demand side. Not undermining the demand. It's probably better than anywhere else in the country, certainly. But on the supply side of the equation, we do have some constraints. The constraints that everybody talks about, I think, in the press, and it's a big political discussion, is around the green belt that surrounds us, which kind of restricts the amount of area that's available for land development. But we take it even deeper than that and look at other constraints that the industry has that maybe they're not being talked about as often. The second, which I think is probably the biggest catalyst for creating the bottlenecks that make the industry unable to meet the demand, is the approvals process. So forget how much land is available. It's how difficult it is to get a piece of land from I bought it and I have my basic entitlements through to now I have something I can sell and build.
What are you seeing? Is this, how long is that taking nowadays?
Well, when we started the business back in the early 2000s, I'd say that going through a zoning process and getting to the point where I can open a sales center and pull a building permit would probably take 9 months.
Okay.
A comparable piece of property, assuming I bought it in the same stage of its entitlement process, might take me 3 years.
Right.
So it's like, I always, when people ask me about it, the analogy I use, it's like lining up in the Olympics for the 100-meter dash. Right. And, Jas has got his airtight suit on, and
I wear that often.
And he's like aerodynamic, and Simeon's taking off all the gold chains, and he's got nothing stopping him, and I've got 4 anchors, a backpack. I'm gonna be slower.
Yeah,
right?
obviously.
So, maybe.
Yeah.
So point being that it's one thing to say, there's constraints around area. It's another thing to, when you have the demand for housing with all these people coming in, to be that long in getting things approved and through the process, I think obviously creates a big bottleneck and a big barrier.
Right. As an investor, where do you see, you've been doing this for so long, as I mentioned, where do you see investors making money right now? In what type of properties? And maybe you can touch also a little bit further on that supply and demand issue, where the delta is to win.
Yeah. So I would say, let me tackle the first one.
Yeah.
I think that, in a fast-moving market, and I think hopefully we made that a bit clearer as to what we mean. You have to sort of look at things on a week-to-week basis. It really does move that quickly. And I think what we're seeing most when it comes to Toronto product, if you want to call it that, is we're seeing a migration a little bit into the peripheral areas of the 416 area code or the downtown area code. And what I mean by that is for an investor who's looking to invest in a deal like us in the development or the manufacturing, or somebody who's looking to buy a unit.
Right.
Really, it's becoming a relative value story, because when you look at sort of the price per square foot that you're paying in the core,
Right.
You're all day $1,200 a foot plus. Plus, right. And if you take, there's certain pockets of the GTA, or I'll call it Toronto, there's certain pockets of even the 416,
Right.
where the value proposition, in our opinion, is a lot more compelling, because you can buy something for much less than that. And what matters to an investor, presumably most, there's two things. Obviously, there's capital appreciation over the long term. I believe that, there's a lot more runway at some of those lower price points. And then the second thing that should matter is your ability to be able to find tenants and be able to cover your costs of carry. And I think that when you look at rental rates throughout the city, they're beginning to become very expensive in the core. But the fact of the matter is that while the 150,000 new people that are coming into the city every day, many of them are well-heeled and have, the highest paying jobs, that's not everybody.
Right.
So there has to be segments of the housing stock that are there for, the vast majority of the population. And that's where we're starting to see these peripheral areas where you can buy for $900 a foot or even less if you're lucky, where rental rates have a lot more room to grow. And I think there's a lot of capital appreciation embedded. So it's almost like, for those of your listeners who follow the stock market, it's like finding a value stock, right? It's like the industry's doing great and all these companies are great, but this one's undervalued.
Yeah.
So we're seeing that in certain pockets of the cities in the west, east, and north peripheral parts of that core.
Of like downtown core.
Yeah. So to me, that I would say is probably the most attractive. And Greybrook, what we do is, as people who are in at the beginning or sort of the forefront, we like to think, that's where we've been buying a lot.
Right. Simeon, Tad?
So there's a few things, and Sasha brings such a high level view, the 30,000 view, the 30,000 foot view to the conversation. So I kind of want to set the ground a little bit on how you can use this data. So Sasha is invaluable to us as an organization because he shares insight of where they're buying and what they're doing, which allows us, so all the work, whatever capital of their business they spend on knowing where to go next, I get it for free because I'm his friend.
I start charging. I feel like I should just. Darcy, make a note.
So
Send Simeon invoice.
So basically, we get to emulate the business model on a much bigger scale onto retail investors. What I wanted to really hone down on, you're saying the periphery of the 416. So we are Toronto brokers, but we're Southern Ontario brokers. We have 35 agents that work all over the place. Myself and Jas have focused, let's call it the last year. And this isn't something like I'm claiming. If you go back to any of our social pages, websites, etc., you're going to see kind of an evolution, like 3 years ago, what we were doing to what we're doing today. And over the last 6 months specifically, or year, every single project that we've been involved in, with the exception of one in Yorkville, has not been in C1. For those who don't know what C1 is, it's a real estate term for the center of the city of Toronto. So we have sold 401 in Yorkdale, we have sold in Etobicoke, we have sold in Mississauga, we have sold in Durham. We're focused right now hard, again, at the advice of our friends of Greybrook. A year ago, we met and we're looking at Scarborough, we're buying Scarborough, East End, Scarborough. And we're like, why? It might actually be on tape.
Yeah.
It may have been one of our conversations, I'm trying to remember, when we were legit saying, well, there's an LRT coming. There was talks of subways being extended. There was all these things. And now that those have been hammered out, we're looking at a completely undervalued market for GTA where it went like this. Scarborough has, the article was in Bloomberg like a week ago.
Right.
where there's like 83% appreciation in certain pockets down by the water, like Upper Beaches, which was like the beach. If you say beaches, you're
not
not
local.
in the know.
Yeah, when you're local, you say the beach.
So if you're from the beach and somebody said Upper Beaches, they'd like almost chase you out of the beach. So, but the Upper Beaches is real.
Yeah,
like they're riding on the coattails of Leslieville and the Beach, which are really high-end neighborhoods, like very, very desirable neighborhoods. And they're surrounded by Greektown, and they're surrounded by like East York Central, which has some of the best schools. And the value has jammed up by nature.
Yeah. You're right. Listen, like you guys have been obviously blazing the right trail for your clients, from my vantage point anyway. Your involvement in your sole C1 project in Yorkville in recent history in Yorkville. C1 today, you need something unique. It has to be special, like me, right?
Yes,
that's a good segue.
Very
It's
special, just like
you guys
you.
will plan that.
I wasn't sure where you were going with that
To
one.
be clear, I don't think I'm special. These two guys. But all jokes aside, you need something unique. You need to be either right on a transit line or in Yorkville, which I think is really catering to a different market, whether it's a rental product, it's a luxury rental or a luxury condo. Those things still have a lot of legs, right? And I think that there's tons of opportunity. Like we're involved in a few different Yorkville projects and others in the city that are like literally like on top of a subway, right? Like those are different. But there's also a lot of product in the C1, and not all of that to me makes a lot of sense. Like when I look at something like at Richmond and Peter,
right?
It's $1,400 a foot. I'm like that makes no sense to me. Like maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right. Who knows? But it doesn't make sense to me. But your point of like starting to look at these areas that are undervalued, I think markets, it's funny because, and we were talking about this before the show, but like we all live here or people that invest here are really immersed in the information. And we just like dissect it to death and look at it, and we should. Sometimes you need to look outside. And, when I look at Toronto, I don't really just, we at the firm don't just look at Toronto. We look at what's happened in other cities that have become global over time, because we can learn. Like we can see what happened in New York, albeit 50 years ago or 40 years ago. But like within today's context, you can see what the dynamic of supply, demand, globalization has done to that city, what it's done to pricing. And my favorite thing is, the economists in the country, our friend Benjamin Tal is the best, frankly, at cutting through the crap. But economists like to say, okay, Toronto's overvalued. And I ask why, and they say, well, if you look at the price to income of a home, it's 10-1, right? Meaning, average household income is 100,000, average house is $1 million, therefore it's 10-1. And look at Halifax, and look at Ottawa, and look at Quebec, and look at Saskatoon.
Right.
They're at 4-1. So Toronto, Vancouver, way overvalued. And I'm like, okay, but who says that everybody who lives in Toronto has to own their home or own their condo? Because the fact is that when cities become London and New York and Sydney and Paris and these other global centers,
the entitlement diminishes.
Yeah, well, I mean, like everybody rents, right? So to me, affordability is not defined just as my ability to own my home or my condominium. It's also defined by my ability to utilize it, and that is through rental. So what's important is to look at the connection between incomes and rental rates, and it's the connection between incomes and carry costs to the renter, right? So those are still well in line. Like when you look at Toronto relative to other cities, even in Canada, they're well in line. But that's not like a story, right? Like it's much more alarming if you can put out there that it's like 10-1.
If it bleeds, it leads, right?
Yeah. So I mean, like you got to be able to cut through the crap. Benjamin Tal does a good job of that. Like he hates that statistic. The other one he hates is the Canadians are 177% of their debt to income ratio.
Yeah, that's their headlines. They're just garbage.
What he says, and when you talk to him, he's like, okay, but like the vast majority of that 177 is your mortgage, which is amortized over 25 years, and your income is in 1 year. Like, how is that a relevant metric?
Right.
Like you're taking debt that is due over the course of 25 years, and you're comparing it to your ability to pay it off in 1 year. Right? It doesn't make any logical sense.
You can't put it in the same bag with a 17% like Visa interest. So when you do that, it's skewed, it's manipulated to create fear and wreak havoc in the marketplace. Nothing more.
But that's, I mean, I might get in trouble for having this type of opinion, but like at the end of the day, monetary policy and fiscal policy is all there to protect from the future. And part of that tool, frankly, is the media. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, do I think that some of the changes implemented in Ontario's market over the past couple of years were good? I do. Like in my industry, people are all shouting that they want B20, the mortgage regulations like abolished. And I'm like, well, why would you abolish it? Like we basically are in a spot now where we have a sustainable growth, and there's still, it's like putting a governor on your car, right? Like instead of going 300 kilometers an hour through a wall, the factory's not going to let you go over 150, right? Like, I mean, like, okay, great. It's still fast.
Right.
And I'm not going to kill myself. Like that's to me what B20 did. So I'm in favor of keeping it. Now, if they want to make certain changes, like if interest rates go up 2%, do you need another 2% on top of that? Probably not. But I think that they're well aware of it. Like policymakers knew that interest rates weren't going to probably escalate that quickly. In fact, they're going the other way. So they kept it where it was. And we'll see where all that pans out, but I'm confident that it'll all be okay.
I wanted to touch on New York and London. You mentioned looking out, and we see price per square foot in places like Manhattan at $3,500 price per square foot, even upwards to $4,000. London, Paris, Tokyo, even like Vancouver is topping
San Fran, Boston,
And then when you look at Toronto, it's at $1,200 on an average.
I agree with you.
Right? And so people will always ask, like, how sustainable is this? I think we have lots more room to grow.
We're just getting started.
Yeah. So if I can address that for you guys, like, because we spend a ton of time trying to understand this. As cities become global, we'll call them, and I think we can all agree that Toronto, you can argue over how global, and are we New York? No. Okay, that's fine. But that doesn't mean that we're not Saskatoon, right? Like, I mean, so we're somewhere in between. And as cities become, I hope there's nobody from Saskatoon.
I was going to say, anyone who's listening to
Saskatoon is lovely.
We still love
I
it.
enjoy.
It's just, we're just talking about population.
I enjoy it there immensely.
So do I. And I'm more talking about the population.
Like, there's literally people who said those Toronto people, and they just clicked off.
I
Hopefully
love the Rough Riders as well. Saskatchewan. I love that.
Big time.
Okay, so we've got that under control. Point being is that we feel Toronto and Vancouver are different and considered global in nature. So what that does is it reverses or spurs capital flow. So it's not just about in cities like, we'll use Winnipeg this time.
Okay.
Typically the people who buy real estate are those who use it every time, right? I'm either living there or renting there or doing something. In cities like Toronto, there's people who buy real estate who have nothing to do with Toronto. They own it, and somebody's got to rent it or whatever. But there's all kinds of, we're neighbors. We own a property in Yorkville at 101 Yorkville. Our neighbor is a German international who's been to Canada like 3 times, and he owns it, and he's owned it for 50 years. Like, these aren't speculators. They're people who see Canada and see Toronto, right? So they see Canada as a safe, very sort of stable country, rule of law, right? All those things, currency stability, and then banking stability. And then they look at Toronto as its major epicenter and the diversified employment base and all the things that we like about the GTA in Toronto. And they buy there and they hold there. So what that does is it creates demand for scarce real estate that's not only coming from the people in the community, but it's coming from everywhere in the world. And that pushes prices up. Now, what you have to be cognizant of, and when people talk about bubbles, okay, so a bubble is when the market disconnects from the local fundamentals, okay? So what that means is prices have been pushed up by all these people from Germany and everywhere else, and the people who use it, right, Torontonians, whether they're business owners or whether they're residents, can no longer afford it. That's a bubble, right? So that gap is when things blow up, when capital flow reverses because they don't like Canadian policy, or there's a better deal in the US, or the government changes corporate tax right? That money leaves and that bubble deflates because it goes back to the fundamentals of the market. So when you look at the fundamentals of the market, back to the point of it's not just affordability of ownership, it's can I rent it? And that is still very connected. So when we look at how much runway's left, and I talk a lot on panels and I get a lot of questions from investors who always say, well, it's got to stop. And my question to them is always, okay, why? Like, so I'm happy to talk about my feelings.
Yeah.
But if you can give me one statistical data point that supports, right? Like if you look at where the economy is, where employment is, where interest rates are headed, all of those factors in terms of stability of Canada, generally speaking. And then when you look at rents to prices and affordability, that all is in line. And then when you look at the macro level, 150,000 people every single year, boom, 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 boom. And if I want to cut down a tree branch for my little house reno, it takes me 12 months.
Right.
Okay, so no problem. Try building a 250 or 350 unit building and see how much red tape you have to get through to actually get that online.
Now, so Jas, I just wanted to touch on a point because we're at a high level, kind of an economy matter. And I had a conversation actually yesterday with a client from Calgary. The gentleman is a C-level executive at one of the oil firms. So it was a really good discussion. I'm just going to touch on a couple points. The difference, kind of the case that you're making for Toronto, which is factual. In my eyes, it's fact. Well, we're living it, we're breathing it. We've actually worked in it for a decade. It's almost, at this point to me, it's almost insulting to have to defend Toronto. If you don't get it, I'm so sorry. If 10 years of data cannot teach you something, then you're beyond the scope of me. Yeah. So Calgary, so I'm having this discussion, and this is a very, very bright man, much brighter than me. He represents the interests of a very large company. And he is watching, I shared it with Chris Slightum. They're watching tens of millions flee Calgary for the last 3 years per day. That means, but that's, and some people call Calgary a bubble bust. That is not a bubble. Calgary was in line perfectly with the economy and what was happening at the time. Calgary and Alberta in general are an energy market. The problem in Alberta is that their government never diversified the economy outside of the commodities. If you're in commodities, as many of you may know, those are cyclical. One drought and the corn goes in Saskatchewan, corn is going up. The whole province is screwed. Lentils, water, forestry in BC. So like when your market is directly tied to a commodity, you're much more volatile. Toronto, going back to Toronto now, because people want to make the same case, and it's just you're in a different library, let alone in the same chapter.
You're comparing apples and oranges.
Correct.
Right?
So here we're service based.
Right.
Every global company has an office in Toronto.
Yep.
It's much more difficult for us to get hurt.
Yeah. We have a resilient market and a resilient base. Like my firm's been investing here for 16 years, and we have investors in 32 different countries. And when I travel around the world and talk to some of those investors, it's funny because their assumption is like, well, you're from Toronto, so you invest in Toronto. I'm like, that has nothing to do with why we invest in Toronto. Zero. Like we have a healthcare business.
Right.
100% of the dollars we've ever deployed in its history are in the US. We've never invested in a Canadian company. It's not like I'm afraid to go to other markets.
Right.
It's that this concoction of ingredients, right? The supply constraints, the demand, everything about it is made this the best market to invest in the world, hands down, right? And it's not to say that that can't change. It's not to say that there can't be volatility in the interim. What we have, you guys have seen our presentations, and we have this one chart that looks like super shockingly complex when you look at it because it comes up and there's like 100 words on it. But what it is it basically shows the market from 2000 to 2019, so 19 years worth of data. And it shows kind of like, it looks like a stock chart, right? So it's like a generally upward trending line, and there's like little peaks and valleys along the way. And then there's a whole bunch of words, and those words are various interventions. So whether they were the government intervening, the Bank of Canada intervening, interest rates moving, policy change, government change, whatever it was. And it shows that there's peaks and troughs along the way, but the trend line stays the same because the fundamentals have stayed the same. So, you listen to people who manage equities and they always talk about long-term investment, right? The reason they're saying long-term investment is because they believe in the fundamentals of the company that they're investing in. And then there's crap that's going to affect the stock price along the way, how people feel, what news comes out, this scandal, that scandal, but it won't over the long run matter much, right? And that's kind of what we have here in the Toronto market. And people who talk about bubbles first should understand what a bubble means. Correct. And your point is exactly correct. Out west, it was not a bubble.
Right.
At the time where real estate prices were high, they were completely connected with and in line with the economics that were local. They worked completely. That is not a bubble.
Directly tied to the commodity.
Correct. That is a cycle for the reasons that you talked about. It's, again, not as diversified and all those things. Bubbles are very different, but people like to use buzzwords, right? There's a bubble here, a bubble there, a bubble. Okay, well, no.
Why are you guys looking at condos so much now? And obviously not like subdivisions, building homes and subdivisions. Why condos?
Yeah, so we do both, but they're different consumers, right? Everything we've talked about in terms of what's driving demand and sort of price growth, you start having affordability challenges, both in rental and buying. And what if it was a homogenous population base that came in every single year, right? 150,000 really rich people. Okay, well then we wouldn't have to worry too much about having diversified housing options, right?
Right.
Or 150,000 single people or with no children. But that's not realistic. We have a very diverse group of people that come into this city every year, diverse employment, diverse income ranges, diverse household formation, okay? So as a result of that, you need different housing options, and where the peripheral subdivision provides relief is for those who have space requirements or who have the means to be able to pay $1 million or whatever the prices are. But that's not everybody. So the condo market, by and large, does two things. One, it provides a more affordable option for people coming here. And when I say affordable, it's only developers that think about per square foot, right? And people like me who we're making our profit on per square foot. So that's how we do our math.
Right.
But at the end of the day, consumers are like, how much does it cost? 500 grand?
Yep.
400, 800. What's my number? Because that's how I determine affordability. Because I go to the mortgage, they give me X dollars, and I have a payment that's Y dollars. I'm not thinking about per square foot prices. So we call that in our industry the chunk rate. So we look at the chunk rate and we say, okay, a condo, you can still get one for $550, $750.
I love that you made mention of that because a lot of people think everything's $1 million plus in Toronto. Well, but it's not.
It's not unless you're, in that $1,400 a foot range, right? So
there's still opportunities to get in at
for sure.
$500,000.
So the question as to why we continue to invest in the condo market is because you look at the composition of people that come into the city, and the housing option that they can afford is a condo. Okay. And then the second reason, as we've already determined and I think talked about at length, is our condo supply is the rental supply.
Yes.
Okay. So you have a vacancy rate that's below 2% in this city. It's hovering around 1.3, 1.6, depending on what statistic you look at. Whatever that number is, it's low. In our event, the other day, we had somebody talk about, I think that number is bullshit because, I don't know.
You're allowed to say that. Yeah, no, say
I think that number's not correct.
Yes.
Because of whatever reasons. Yeah. And I read somewhere that it's 3%. And Pauline Learman, who's one of the head of research at Urbanation, which is like the industry guru in this, was like, that would be awesome because healthy markets are 3%. Maybe we would have a better, more affordable option for people if it was 3%. So that's not a bad thing.
Right.
So we are severely undersupplied. And our condo market is the rental pool. So we continue to invest there because we see more affordable options for the people coming in. Therefore, there'll always be demand, in our opinion.
Right.
And then the second thing is that we see a tremendous need for rental based on vacancy rates and other things that the condo market fulfills. So that's really the reasons.
I want to take the next 5 minutes because I want to be respectful of everyone's time to speak about a live opportunities that investors and like our members here and online can take advantage of. You spoke about transit, which is always excites me when we're talking about a pre-construction condo investment because we know that's where tenants want to be. We also know that that's where the values increase the most. So Simeon, because it's a little nostalgic to you because you grew up in this area, and it's Greek town. Let's talk about...
And I'm Greek.
And you're Greek, yeah.
A little bit.
Let's talk about our project at Lynx.
So this project does mean a lot to me, and it actually means a lot to Sasha's business partner, Peter. And it's not because obviously we're Greek and it's close to Greek town. It's,
I think that's like 100%.
all right, maybe it is. Okay, it has something to do. Yeah. So I did own real estate. So my very first investment property that I bought with actually 100% my own dollars was 2 blocks away from there on a street called Naganosh, number 1 Naganosh. And I picked it up for less than, I don't know, 230, 240. Sold it 3 years later for 330. And that was kind of when I made my little spread.
Where you start to get in.
That I leveraged
and started to build equity, yeah.
And again and again and again. So Main and Danforth, so that whole area, I can speak to the area.
Yeah.
The area is, it's the Danforth Village area, and it's bordered by Leslieville, the beach. You have Crescent Town and VP Golf Course a minute away, but you have a subway station literally at the intersection.
Yep.
On the one side.
Where the building's going to be built.
Across the street.
Yeah.
Literally across the street. You have the GO train station literally 100 meters away. And you have a streetcar at your door. There is no more transit options you can find other than a private
Kind of get the
helicopter.
trifecta.
Right.
You get the trifecta.
So when we
The
look at-
helipad is on the roof, so there's that.
So this
Not yet.
so not this building. So this building, like, and again, we get involved because of our relationship with some of the biggest developers in the city and the money behind them. But we do choose, when we choose to kind of like really push a product, it has to be scalable for our investors. So I can't have 3 units to sell and send an email out or present to a room of 400 people. Just, you can't do that. So in this case, we have unrestricted access to a project that is directly on the subway line in an area that is fundamentally undervalued today. I know as a fact, because like part of our due diligence is to kind of look at what's happening in the area from a development standpoint. And obviously you know this, but I mean, there's 1,800 doors coming on Dawes Road.
Yeah.
If you look at Dawes Road today, there's old apartment buildings. The landscape of Main and Danforth is going to change dramatically over the next 10 to 15 years. You actually won't recognize it. If anybody thinks that's too long for a transformation, I don't know what.
Well, with pre-construction condos.
So if you were in Regent Park, in Main Danforth, there's no Regent Park.
Yeah.
But like, it's only because it's the only transformation, like real transformation I've ever witnessed in my life.
Liberty Village.
Liberty Village.
Yeah,
for
good.
sure.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
From nothing.
Yeah.
From nothing
Tumbleweeds.
to everything.
Yeah.
Tumbleweeds.
And Regent Park from a complete C and D market to now an A market right beside the financial district.
Yeah.
And Main and Danforth being a working class, what used to be a working class neighborhood will now be the working class neighborhood of the future, meaning it will always be right outside C1.
Yeah.
No question.
Yeah. And well,
So
you're seeing, you're seeing averages of 1,300 in the city, and you're able to get in at 900, even a little less
You
than
could be
900
at Union
price per
Station in
square
12
foot.
minutes.
Well, I'm just talking about the delta, right? From where the average of the city, especially in the core, is going upwards to that 1,250, 1,300 price per square foot, and you can get in. That's what
It's undervalued. Like this is the point. I mean, you
This is
guys
the point.
hit the nail on the head. Obviously an area that's special to you. My 2 business partners are both Greek.
Yep. Yeah.
So when we started looking at the opportunity, I was like, well, what are people going to think about all the Greeks around them? Are you sure they're going to want to buy it? Literally, almost got punched in the face, and then we moved on.
Yes, people will want to buy.
And something that we always like to look at when it comes to pre-construction is obviously location. You can't pick up the building and move it. But second is the builder. Who's building and what's their reputation? And here we have Tribute. And maybe you can speak about Tribute.
Yeah, I mean, like they're among the best in the GTA in the country. We've worked with them for 15 years on various projects. We like to think that we add value, obviously, to our developments, and not going to say we don't add value to this one, but like they don't need a lot from us. Like they're very good.
Right.
So we're lucky to have Al Livfeld and his team involved with us.
Sorry, we're speaking about tribute homes. Tribute communities.
Yeah.
So you can look them up on the internet. I mean, I think they've delivered over 30,000 homes. They have a pristine reputation. So the best in the business. So not only is the builder, and I think today that matters a lot, right? Like if you look at today when an investor is making a unit or making a decision to purchase a unit in pre-construction, they have to look at all kinds of different variables. Like, are they going to be on time? And how, like, is there going to be any potential of having these projects canceled? And, you have all these factors at play nowadays. So the reputation and track record of the developer matters. Like that's one of your first diligence items. I know for you guys, that was a big thing.
Yeah, and we also want to make sure that there's incentives in place, right? I.e., can you do an assignment? Like life happens, that you're buying it today, the building's going to be built in 3 years from now. Can you assign it if something comes up? Is there cap development charges? We're not sure what development charges are going to be in 3-4 years.
Well, I think we
should.
I think we could preface that to a couple things. Toronto does have some of the highest development charges, the highest development charges in the country.
World? Like
I
gotta think it can't be any worse.
Better yet. So like literally well over $100,000 per door in the city of Toronto is charged by the city and the provincial government. And
22% of the cost, and that includes HST, so there's a bit of federal in there, but generally speaking, 22% of the cost structure.
And some of that gets put onto the purchaser, but we want to make sure that in the contract that it's capped, and so the investor is protected.
So as an investment strategy spotlight that this was supposed to be in, the way you win in pre-construction is you need to find a project that you believe is undervalued, that by the time it is built, there's going to be a specific profit in value where you can refinance it, take your equity position out, keep it for the long term, and actually have no exposure to the market.
Well, you also don't have to qualify for, like you don't have to get a mortgage and tie up the ability.
You have to be able to get a mortgage, but you don't have to close on it.
But you don't actually have to get the
mortgage. Make
that
crystal clear.
For another 3 years.
And why that matters to me in this particular project is as we've established the relative affordability, one, and two, because I think it's a value stock, I'll call it, like a value play, it won't be like that forever. That's the whole point of the value play. Like I think we're going to be sitting here 3 years from now, and we're going to be looking at where a condo at Main and Danforth trades, and we're going to be like, the people who didn't buy are going to be like, oh man, I wish I would have done that, right? I've seen this through my career several times in these areas that are, I mean, our job as development is we are like developing, right? Like people don't show up in an empty field and be like, I want to live here.
Right.
Like it's like, but it's true, right? Like when we did our first project in Liberty Village, there was nothing there, right? So it's like people would be like, are you crazy? Like, why would you do something here? And then of course, as it develops, people want to live there. So of course the developers like to think they have that foresight, but this is one of those types of opportunities. Like I most of my capital, my personal money goes into our investments, our deals that we do every year. From time to time I buy units. And I bought a unit in this project. Like to me, it was a no-brainer. Like I literally couldn't get to the event, as you guys know, that night. Our little and I was basically I was just like, I'll take one. Well, which one do you want? Any one of them.
Because
like,
it's going to rent out. The rent's going to cover your expenses, and with this type of investment, the down payment as an investor that's needed 20%. I love the fact that it's stretched out. It's stretched out over 2 years, and so I can get creative and invest in other types of investments. I don't have to put all that 20%
or
down
just
at
not
once.
have all that capital in for 2 years.
Yeah,
for sure.
So the big benefits of pre-construction is the fact that you have an extended deposit structure.
Yeah.
You're going to tie up the property with 5% down now. The builder does need to get to 10 or 15% depending on their financial position within a certain amount of time to get going on the ground. So the deposit is spread out over time. In this case, it's just under 2 years.
2.5 years.
Whatever it is.
Whatever it is. But so you have the advantage of a spread out deposit structure. You have the right to get, if life happens where you need to get out of your position, you need the right to assign the contract. Much like we were talking, you missed the conversation earlier, that you need to be able to assign a contract to get out of a contract or whatever the case may be. With a pre-construction, all you're buying is paper. There is no bricks. There is no nothing. You cannot be stuck with this contract if life happens, and life does happen. In many cases, you can also, if everything is amazing and the market goes up like crazy, you'll also have a position to potentially sell your assignment.
For profit.
For a profit. It has been the case for the last 10 years. I personally don't welcome speculators to my wheelhouse. I personally don't. If you want to do it, and I'm a real estate broker, go ahead. I'll sell the real estate.
Right.
I don't advise on speculation.
Well, we all talk about buy and hold.
If you're buying to flip, you're speaking to the wrong group anyways, because our fundamental strategy is to buy and hold, but you can. If the market conditions are ripe and everything we said comes true with no curveballs and no nothing, by all means, go ahead and do it. It's an option. But it should not be the driver of your decision. The driver of your decision should be fundamentals of real estate.
We believe in the buy and hold so much
strong.
in this area that we actually offer a 2-year tenant placement and 2-year property management incentive at no cost to any of our members because we believe in this location. We know there's not going to be an issue finding a tenant.
It's interesting. I want to make a comment on speculation because, or even investors. Like people read the newspaper and they make villains out of people who invest or speculate. Right? Like, get that speculators, get them. And I'm like, okay, well, it sort of depends on what everybody's motivated by different things, right? Some people are motivated to own something and pay it down over 20 years. Some people are motivated for short-term capital appreciation. Speculators aren't a large portion of the market as it is, but even those that exist, all I say to people who are looking to make speculative investments in real estate is that, it's make sure you have the capital to do it. Like what that's the issue. It's not, I don't want, ideally, nobody, whether they're a speculator, should be investing in something if they don't have the money. Like if you're like,
don't stretch yourself,
borrowing it and doing all this kind of stuff. That's when things get, because then if things do go wrong, you feel the pinch, right? Speculating is like, okay, I think that this is going to go up and I want to sell it before I close. But if the market goes the other way, you need to be able to close. Otherwise, you're going to be in trouble, right? So that's the only thing, is to make sure that speculators understand the risks of speculation. The market needs every type of investor, right? I think where the government grew concerned was around affordability, right? It was saying that, okay, well, if there's a whole bunch of people speculating, then there's a whole bunch of people who need homes. They can't buy the homes. But they in my opinion, quantified that problem. Like that problem is
that was proven
fractional in the market. Like we're not talking about many at all. Like less than 5% of the market for sure, if not less.
I'm starting to get the hook by my executive producer. So I always finish these pod sessions with one tip. Simeon and I gave ours. I want to hear one tip to our listeners and viewers today. It can come from a real estate perspective, a leadership perspective. You've seen a lot and you've been through a lot, and so I want to hear that one tip from you, Sasha.
I mean, I tend to give the same tip every time because this is how kind of I live my life. Like you can't be an expert in everything. So be an expert in evaluating experts, right? Like so it's a new one. Surround yourself with the right team, get the right advice, and I can't possibly stress that more when everybody tries to do-it-yourself approach to investment. They read their own research. I don't need a lawyer. I can figure it out. I can write my own Please don't.
Yeah.
Please just don't. Because you will make a lot of mistakes, not because you're not all super smart and competent, but it's a very narrow expertise.
And you don't know what you don't know.
100%. Right? And that goes for us. Like we're professional investors. We manage $15 billion worth of real estate, and we don't do a single deal we have an army of people inside who are all experts, and then we go get an external law firm, an external consultant, every single deal.
Awesome. Sasha, thank you so much. You were special today.
Oh,
just want to
now
end
I feel
it with
good.
that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time, buddy. I really appreciate it.
This has been the REC Experience Podcast with Jas Takhar, an REC Canada production.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching and listening. Please take a second right now to subscribe and follow us on whatever podcast platform you're watching or listening. It means the world to me. Thank you.